Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Werner Poscharnik. I'm from Austria, Europe. Let me share some thoughts about my dear friend. Karl Mikolka felt that he had spent his life in the service of the horse, as he put it. And this was indeed so, because the greatest part of his energy went into endeavors of trying to teach horse owners to act for the welfare of their horses. That means, do not exploit your horse for your purpose, but help him to do his job by sound methods of training. And by these methods, you become a better rider on a better horse. It is as simple as that. But only too few people understood Karl Mikolka's aims. Most riders want fast results. The horses pay the price. Karl Mikolka was always courageous and somehow stubborn, a warrior in a way. He applied at the Spanish riding school of Vienna, although his parents didn't seem enthusiastic about this project. He didn't like chief rider Ignaz Lauscher's constant bullying and quit the Spanish riding school, even though he was promoted to the rank of a chief rider himself. He went to Brazil to prove that he could lead a life as an acknowledged rider and trainer in the new world without the security net of the Spanish riding school, a step he may have regretted later in his life. But he was confident that he could help the Brazilian horses and riders to Olympic levels with his art and knowledge. Unfortunately, rarely in life only merit counts. You need good luck too. Karl didn't have enough of it, and he didn't bend to certain intrigues, and thus he headed to the USA. He could gather a flock of faithful followers around him and received great appreciation from good people who felt his charisma. He could convince them of what he called the system. This system was the tradition of the Spanish riding school of Vienna, the Austrian art of riding, an equestrian culture successful for horse and riders for 500 years, a system that cares for the welfare of the horse in order to extend his longevity, a system that educates equestrians who ride with grace, showing no effort. Karl Mikolka was one of the great men who carried this art from Europe to the Americas and other parts of the world. That is why he got featured in my book, Austrian Art of Riding, 500 Years, published by Xenophon Press, USA. He even wrote a foreword to my book, which he loved, for he proudly knew he was part of this marvelous history. But during the decades of the 20th century, modern dressage developed into an unhealthy competitiveness. Horses are more and more forced by totally unclassical training methods of modern sports dressage. Karl was too little businessman and too much honest to follow this commercial path. He insisted on true classical education of horse and rider instead of buying large warm bloods from Germany and selling them after hurry-up training to customers greedy for instant success in shows. Such trends in the equestrian world worried him more than he admitted, I suspect. And maybe these worries even opened the door for an ugly enemy, cancer. Our warrior bravely fought against this mighty adversary until the end of the tragedy. I gratefully remember years of correspondence with Karl, cafe conversation, strolling with him through the historic streets of Vienna. In 2018, he recorded a preface for my audiobook in German, Meilensteine österreichischer Reitkunst. Wistfully, I hear the old gentleman talking in German, still with a slight Viennese accent, a bit Americanized. A precious souvenir.
Renowned dressage master Karl Mikolka passed away on May 12, 2019, after a courageous struggle with cancer. Karl was born on August 21, 1935 in Vienna, Austria. Events during that era in Europe, such as the Nazi occupation of Austria, Karl's father being drafted into the German army, and the arrival in May 1945 of Russian troops in Vienna, forced young Karl and his mother to live on the run, amidst bombing and gunfire, hiding in bunkers and basements. They also hid and cared for a Jewish woman in their basement for 2 years, an act which would have resulted in instant execution had they been discovered. Before and after the war, Karl also had pleasant memories of riding in a neighbor's horse-drawn wagon. He loved the scent of horses and the feel of leather reins in his hands, and often stopped on his way to school to feed treats to the tethered working horses, risking reprimands from his teacher for being late for classes. A weekend job exercising harness racehorses, plus encouragement from a riding instructor, further fueled Karl's desire to pursue a life with horses. Following his graduation in 1954 from the American equivalent of high school plus 2 years of college, he applied to and was accepted by the prestigious Spanish riding school in Vienna. At that time, the school was temporarily exiled in Wels, Upper Austria, in order to protect the horses, along with other Austrian national treasures, from the destruction of war. The story of the rescue of the Austrian Lipizans from the Russians, commandeered by General Patton at the end of World War II, was the subject of the Disney movie Miracle of the White Stallions. Karl, as well as the other riders of the school, appeared in many scenes in the movie. After being promoted to the highest rank of chief rider in 1968, Karl left the school to accept an invitation from Brazil to develop a world-class dressage team capable of competing in the next Olympics to be held in Canada. After 4 years of preparing a promising medal prospect, tragedy struck when turbulence during a flight to Canada necessitated that the agitated horse be put down in order to preserve the safety of the flight. The opportunity to fulfill a lifelong dream of coming to America followed Karl's assignment in Brazil when he was invited to help found an educational program at the Massachusetts Dressage Academy at Friars Gate Farm in Pembroke, developing a systematic classical dressage curriculum. This led to a demanding schedule of nationwide clinics, judging, and coaching assignments, which would eventually expand to Canada, Mexico, Australia, and Japan. He was a founding influence in the United States Dressage Federation and would serve as a judge at both USDF events and Olympic selection trials. The years 1980 to 1997 found Karl at Temple Farms in Illinois. There, Karl created an American version of the Spanish riding school, training Lipizan stallions established from imported Austrian stock by steel magnate Temple Smith. Using the methods employed by the Spanish riding school, the Temple Lipizans were schooled in all aspects of classical dressage, including the airs above the ground. In 1997, Karl and his wife Lynn relocated to Massachusetts, where he continued to write for major equestrian publications and online media, as well as conducting equestrian clinics on location throughout the United States. In 2003, Karl was inducted into the USDF Hall of Fame. He has published numerous articles on his riding philosophy and training methods based on a 400-year tradition of studying and finding the best ways to elevate the horse as a definitive equestrian athlete, thinking partner, friend, and reliable companion. Karl Mikolka spent his life in service of the horse.
Lieber Karl, wie ich von deinem Tod erfahren habe, hat es mich eigentlich sehr berührt. Ich möchte auf diesem Weg auch deiner lieben Familie mein aufrichtiges Beileid aussprechen. Wir haben uns das letzte Mal bei der 450-Jahr-Feier in Wien gesehen, wo du mit deiner lieben Frau, wo wir auch zusammen gefrühstückt haben und ich euch dann in den Stall und dann in die Reitbahn und auch dann am Heldenplatz, wo die 450-Jahr-Feier stattfand, begleitet habe. Ich kann mich noch genau erinnern, wie du vor vielen, vielen Jahren deine Ursprungsanfänge bei meinen Eltern in der Reitschule gemacht hast. Ich war ein kleiner Bub und du bist damals gekommen, um Reiten zu üben und Reiten zu lernen. Nachher hast du den großen Weg in der spanischen Hofreitschule gemacht, wie du es bis zum Oberbereiter geschafft hast. Du warst immer ein Vorbild für viele Reiter, nicht nur in der Schule, sondern weltweit. Du warst ein richtiger Pferdemensch. Du fehlst uns allen. Ich wünsche dir auf diesem Weg alles erdenklich Gute und dass du in Frieden ruhst.
Hello, I'm Julie Ulrich. I live in Normandy, but I used to live in Massachusetts. When Karl Mikolka and Cindy, who was then his wife, decided to stay in the United States after having been in Brazil, and they wanted to find a place to train in the United States, my then husband Richard and I were very pleased to invite him to Friars Gate Farm in Massachusetts, Pembroke, to do training. It was at that point, after everything was ironed out, that they decided to stay with us. For the next 5 years, it was an adventure. I'm a jumping rider, and I learned to design all the courses so that they did not interfere with the diagonal, the center line, or the pillars, which were rapidly installed in my indoor arena. I got to know Karl Mikolka because at the beginning, very beginning, people brought him Morgans and Arabians and draft horses to see what he could do with those horses. And sometimes I convinced him to change horses with me and let me ride those horses a little bit while he rode mine. I had some nice ones that I was riding in the jumping competitions. After I got my horses back from each one of those short sequences, I found that my horses were greatly changed. They would do for me what he had taught them to do. They were calm and they were educated and they were much more supple. That's how you get to know someone. It was an old saying that you don't know anyone at all until you've ridden their horse. And when I rode the horses that Karl had ridden for me, I got to know Karl Mikolka. But he yelled a lot. He never yelled at anyone, and he never got angry at a horse. But he used to yell into the atmosphere about his secrets were being stolen by some unknown personage that we didn't recognize, or that he was misrepresented everywhere in the world, or that he was going to stop teaching entirely. He yelled this into the atmosphere, but it didn't affect what happened when you were in the ring with him and he was working with you. The results were absolutely astonishing. While he was there, I had the good fortune to ride in a short session with Dinemathy. And Dinemathy said to me, "Are you the one who has the stable where Karl Mikolka is training?" "Yes," I said, "that's me." He said, "We finally have someone in the United States who knows all the answers." I knew that, but he did too. Karl left me with 3 very, very interesting and important things in my riding. One, he taught me the accurately timed half halt, which really changed my life entirely and changed the way that all horses responded to me and to my hand. It was an incredible gift that he gave me. The second was the shoulder in. Well, I had done shoulder in, but I had no idea of the 5 or 6 different priorities that you can put on shoulder in, about lowering the inside hip or liberating the outside shoulder, or all sorts of things that you can do in shoulder in, which change a horse dramatically, even in his jumping career. And the last thing he taught me was how to ride a young horse, which was forward and with very little hand. So I even closed 3 pictures, and those pictures, one is me doing the shoulder in because I love it so much. It's my favorite thing to do with horses. The second is me sitting on a horse that Karl had taught to do the levad. This horse was a mouse-like creature who was afraid of his own shadow, and he would literally tremble if he was asked to walk over poles on the ground. He was frightened to death. Well, the other thing about that horse, he was a school horse, is he couldn't hold the canter. So he was used for walking and trotting because he really had no canter and got very nervous when he was asked to do so. Karl said every horse should have a life, every horse should have a purpose. No horse, no matter how handicapped, cannot learn to do something. So he took that horse and taught him to do levad, which he did very well. He didn't have to move, he could just do his levad. He was teaching me to do levad, and I am sitting in a position which is showing my jumping background. I had a long way to go before I learned to sit properly on that levad. But pretty soon every child in my stable, some of them only 9 and 10 years old, could ride a horse in levad. That was Karl. And the last picture I enclose is Karl riding a young horse. And to me, it's my favorite picture of Karl. He's riding the horse forward, it's engaged, it's pushing, it's calm, it's in a natural balance, and he has absolutely very little hand. The horse knows the limit of that hand, but the horse is not on contact or framed the way people are so insistent upon doing with their young horses today. It's the epitome of how horses should be ridden for months and months after the horse begins to search for the contact. All of this Karl gave me, and it changed my life, and I'm sure he gave you all things too, which changed your life. So we say goodbye to a huge presence in our life with a lot of regret, but with a great satisfaction in having known him also. Safe travels, Karl.
Ring 1, ready for the intermediate one. Lock on.
too late.
Words seem small and inadequate when it comes to paying tribute to Karl. My horses and I had the privilege of being Karl's students for over 30 years. Very special to me was the close friendship my husband Robert and I developed over the years with Karl and his beautiful, multi-talented wife, Lynn. Dedication to lifelong personal study combined with his distinguished accomplishments and willingness to share his knowledge made Karl an inspiring teacher. Beyond being inspirational, Karl had the ability to bring the rider to a new understanding of the horse, which I would say often felt mystical in its completeness. Truly one of the most renowned and accomplished horsemen of the 20th century, Karl Mikolka.
Very good. Very good.
My teacher, Irma Hotz, recommended taking a clinic with Karl Mikolka. Irma sang his praises and told me there was not another teacher on the planet like Karl. I had just purchased a pre-St. George horse from Holland. I'd ridden third level with decent scores but wanted a horse that I could learn from. So I took Irma's advice and signed up to ride in the 2-day clinic. I remember coming into the ring and there Karl stood. He asked me to ride over to him. His first words to speak to me were, "So, you are the next up-and-coming FEI rider?" I was a bit taken aback but returned with a, "No sir, I just want to learn to ride correctly." He walked over and grabbed my hand and began shaking my wrist. Then he took his hand down by my spur and said, "Announce when your spur touches my hand," which he had me do several times. The lesson began and I was in awe throughout. Irma was right. He was so different as every exercise made Monarch more and more supple. At the end of the lesson, I thanked him and he looked at me and said, "You're not so bad." After that clinic, I went to every clinic he gave in the area. I even traveled to his farm in New York and stayed for a week at a time. He helped me to achieve getting my gold medal in 1988. He moved to Florida and came back for an occasional clinic, and wherever Karl went, I followed. I got married and moved to Georgia in 1994. I lost touch with Karl after that, but my husband Scott knew how much I admired Karl and found out where he went after Florida. So I contacted him and he agreed to come to Georgia to do clinics. We would host clinics several times a year. I got to ride my personal horse along with other training horses. Karl helped me train Fahrenheit from second level to Grand Prix. Karl continued coming for clinics until he was diagnosed with lymphoma. Karl and I stayed in contact through emails. He continued teaching me through them. I had very successful competition seasons with many horses because of Karl. I always called him my mentor. After he beat the cancer, I wanted to continue with clinics, but it seemed every time I got a date, something would come up, and I never rode with Karl again. But every training email I had, I saved and read and reread them, as well as watched all the videos of all the clinics of all the students and myself that my husband took. Karl always called Scott captain after Scott put him in the MD-11 simulator at Delta and taught him to fly. Karl loved that. Karl and I stayed in touch until his diagnosis of cancer again. He fought long and hard, but only to be taken from this earth. On the day and time Scott and I were driving to the airport to fly to Brazil, I received a message that Karl passed. A part of me died too, until something happened in Brazil. I tried a few horses and looked at many, but none I wanted for my last partner. The very last day, the last horse I looked at seemed to have my name on him. After I got done trying him, they untacked him and brought him out to measure him. I stood in front of him and looked into his eyes. I asked them what his name was, and they said Mentor. I broke down with tears of joy because I know that Karl had something to do with this meeting. Mentor is now home with me in Georgia, and it's strange to say, but I feel Karl is close by too.
My name is Lydia Taylor, and I am grateful and honored to be able to be a part of this memorial to an amazing horseman and the person, Karl Mikolka. I met Karl about 20 years ago when I used to live in Massachusetts, and just randomly found an advertisement for a clinic. And I went and audited this very first clinic. And afterwards, he stayed and talked to me. And we quickly found out that we both immigrants and naturalized citizens. And I'm from Russia, so he sang me a song in Russian. And ever since, a friendship was born. I didn't have a horse to ride back then, so I audited Karl's clinics in Massachusetts and Rhode Island and New Hampshire over the years, later rode with him. And auditing was such an amazing experience, as there were a lot of regular students, and I got to watch horses and riders transform from absolutely unbalanced, uneducated, not strong enough and stiff, to those beautiful partners with a horse dancing so lightly and beautifully for the rider. And it didn't matter where you started. Karl worked with any rider and any horse, as long as the horse was sound enough to ride, and the rider had an open mind. There were young riders, there were old riders, there were horses of every possible breed and age and background. And I watched clinic after clinic, year after year, Karl find this unique approach that worked for this pair and bring him through the years and completely transform them. And people got transformed too in the process, as their understanding of the world dressage changed completely. And I think Karl is such a unique combination of an amazing rider as well as talented trainer and an amazing teacher all in once. Those are three separate skills, and they're not mutually exclusive, but it's very hard to find a person who can embody all three. And to top it off, you had this huge personality and an amazing persona with a life outside of horses that included everything from archery, horseback archery, motorcycle riding, sailing, playing instruments. So along with the riding education, the friendship developed, and we kept it up over the years, even when I moved away. And we'll talk via emails, and when I got my own horse, I'd send a video lesson. And I know that a lot of us, Karl's students and friends, feel a little lost because it's such a huge void that his passing created. He's just always was there. I keep catching myself every time I ride that, oh, I should write Karl that this happened today. And then I realize I can no longer do that. And this is sad. Yes, it is. But at the same time, realization that there are hundreds, maybe thousands of riders out there who remember Karl and his teaching and his words every time they get on a horse, every time they hear his voice counting strides or asking to pay attention. And I think with the man so talented, with his body of work, or the development of his training system, I think it touched so many people that I think this is Karl's legacy, that he never left anybody indifferent. And those who followed his system and chose to spend time with him are so deeply impacted that his words and his teaching and his jokes and his stories will forever stay with us. And it's I'm sorry, getting emotional. I think we should continue an effort to stay in touch and promote the work that the man has done. Thank you.
I met Karl Mikolka in 1989 during a blizzard when I made my way from Chicago to Temple Farms, looking to learn from him. My quest was to find a trainer who had a deep consideration of the horse and a knowledge base that involved the classical method. Karl more than embodied both of these. That snowy day, I asked him if I could become his working student, and he asked me, was I dedicated enough? Meaning, could I take orders? He said no. I persevered. It took me 5 months of no's to get him to accept me. I was his longest ever working student, 6 years. From the beginning, everything I had half feared, half desired, Karl made comfortable and doable. The first time he asked me to go into the stall and get a stallion, I hesitated more than a moment, scared. Don't worry, he said, they're just like big dogs. And Belvedere was. For the next 6 years, I sat on clients' fine horses, and he gave me remarkable lessons that transformed them into extraordinary horses. His details were meticulous: how much weight should be distributed between the haunches and the forehand through half halts, or how to use his unique techniques of the cavesson for suppling. He taught from a deep knowledge of the classical method and could transform it into a flexible, rigorous system accessible to each and every individual horse. As important as his knowledge was Karl's true respect and regard for the nature of the horse. He knew on some intuitive level how to win any horse over. His first interface emphasized mutuality between horse and rider. After a training request, he always built in some time and space for the horse to choose his response. Riding for him was a partnership. The horse was an active participant. He practiced the Spanish riding school principle, thinking horse, thinking rider. Once, after a horse accomplished a request with spectacular results, he grinned and said, "Quick, jump off. You'll shock him and he'll never forget it." He had faith in the potential of any horse to change. He knew that it was through the steady application of small, everyday accomplishments that built the horse towards his best potential. He said once, "Grandiosa is an Olympian today." Karl became the compass for my own work. I salute his memory from the full thankfulness of my heart.
I guess I feel that this is such an honor to be included in a tribute to Karl. I've known Karl for 30 years. I've ridden many different types of horses with Karl in many different situations. And I have to say truly that it was a highlight. One of the biggest highlights in my life is my association with Karl Mikolka. His loss has been an incredible slam to the equine community, to the dressage community. There's nobody that has his type of training and knowledge base and his ability to teach. Years ago, I rode with Karl in a small arena in New Lenox, Illinois, and I used to I used to take 3 horses to ride with him in a trailer, and I would drive and say, it doesn't matter if he doesn't know my name. It doesn't matter. All it matters is I learn and I become a better rider. I absolutely was intimidated. I don't think he knew my name for 2 years. And I think maybe Karl sensed, the way I was approaching it. I had such a sincere interest in learning from him. I think eventually he sort of realized that. And then over time, we just developed this amazing relationship. When he stepped into the riding arena, he couldn't help himself. He just turned into the most masterful instructor that you would ever find. And I just truly feel so fortunate to have been able to ride and train with him. Prior to Karl, I had done a lot of self-teaching, which is what it is. And I had also ridden in from different dressage instructors with different approaches, and they were all good and they all helped me. But for some reason, the explanations that Karl gave and the way that he really taught you how to impact each area of the horse's body, all of a sudden it took some of the mystery out of wondering if you had it right, or if you were getting close, or is this the way I'm supposed to be doing it? And I know that those sound like kind of naive statements, but in the beginning I think everybody is there. I don't think there's anybody that started out in dressage so is this how I'm supposed to hold my reins? Is this the forward that they're talking about? How much? How little? And so he gave us directives all the time that you could, even when you were by yourself, you had a reference to go to, and therefore your own time when you were practicing, it was a lot more effective because you really had a lot of direction. I think it's very important. Every time I give a lesson or I work a horse, I feel Karl Mikolka's presence with me. This was before he passed. I always felt his presence with me, and I felt that there was a standard that you needed to hold as a teacher and as a trainer and as a horse professional. And I hold that very dear to my heart because I think that he was so above so many other people in the horse industry in that regard. And when he would never just sit in a chair and tell you a little this or a little that. He was so involved in your lesson, involved in helping you, involved in giving you the tools. He expected you then to take the tools and to pay attention and to listen, but he worked so hard every lesson he ever gave. What I have found also is that the method itself, even with people that are really struggling with learning dressage that the method itself helps advance them forward. If they understand the exercises, if they understand the parts of the horse that you are trying to influence. In Karl's method, there were so many good exercises that kind of immediately showed you that you were going in the right direction. And so that helps take a rider forward because they're not guessing. They're not saying, well, this is, my instructor's telling me to do this, but I don't know why. I just feel that he was the top trainer in the world, maybe one of the top trainers in the world, but that type of trainer, for whatever reason, is just not, I think it's just our changing world. It's just not out there. I think it's a huge task to try to take his method forward. All of us that have ridden with him collectively will never measure to who he was, but all we can do is the best that we can do, and to sincerely have that intention. So I just have such a soft spot in my heart for him, and a sadness, that this whole era is kind of winding down. And I hope that we can influence some young people to take this information and take it forward.
Long side. Not here, the long side. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Turn, 2, 3. Like a square with 5 sit downs. Turn early, turn. Left, 2, 3, 4, 5. Turn, 2. Left, 2, 3, 4, 5. Turn, 2. Straight left. You have to turn 3 steps. Every young rider was rotated. So today you have, let's say, you're my teacher for 3 weeks, and then Mary Warning would be my teacher for the next 3 weeks. Because they try to feel you out too. How you respond to certain things, and what do you think? Botaiski always said, Mr. Irvinger, he was our chief rider, what do you think about Mikolka? Is it worth the investment? And then if you for some reason you made Mr. Irvinger a little angry, he would say, I don't think so. And then you were back to the stable, and for 6 weeks you were only a groom, and they gave you a second chance to get to a left, this was a little higher position, and go back to the riding school, where they started again the program of feeling you out and teaching you okay, without stirrups, 45 minutes on a horse. You get bloody knees at the beginning, you get bloody seat bones, and every morning it breaks open, it hurts like hell. You want to be a man and don't show the pain. And you pay your dues already then. Front, 2, rear, 2, front, 2. You could step. To connect the horse to the ground should be your goal. In my Mannschaft is very right? So left, front. When the end of the canter strike, at the beginning of the canter strike, you load up the right-handed for 2 strikes. Rear 2, front 2, rear 2, right?
I'm excited to read it on to all for this.